one of the biggest topics that there are in agencies that everyone is familiar, which is budgets. And for those new to Amazon advertising, what does managing a limited budget really mean day to day in your work?
So obviously a lot of brands face this problem and no one has unlimited budget except, the sort of big conglomerates. So everyone has the issue of how to manage budgets and how to deal with limited budgets and how that affects your performance, I suppose. In terms of managing it, there's different tools you can use. There's different sort of aspects of like campaign optimization you can put in place to reduce that stress, I suppose, on the budget. It's never, a magic spell over everything, and everything that you can do all these things and everything kind of is fixed. There are ways of managing the budget so that you can kind of be visible throughout the day longer, essentially, and that's what everyone kind of wants to do. Behind the reasoning is everyone wanting to stay in budget for as long as possible throughout the day, so that in the evening shopping hours, I suppose, that you're visible to customers when they're on their phones and laptops in the evening, and hopefully your ads are visible, essentially.
Yeah, it's all about trying to stretch out that budget that you do have. It's especially difficult on clients that have got a large number of SKUs and a smaller budget to put between those SKUs. One of the tools that we've been using recently for one of our clients has been budget day parting. So essentially using software to split the budget out into different times of day and to help maintain visibility so you don't use it all up in the morning. It's not a perfect solution because obviously you want to be controlling your budget with your bids rather than with your budgets. You don't want to have any points at the time of the day where you have zero visibility. The other tool that we've been using is bid day parting. So lowering bids during less profitable or lower volume times of the day, which makes sure that your budget is spent during the most optimal times of the day. There's obviously a use for both of them. If you're in a peak period, for example, like Prime Day, you've budget day parting before because you don't know what demand's going to be like, and if you've got limited budgets, you don't want to be using all of that up early on if your peak selling hours are later.
I actually feel that the best solution for limiting budgets is not having a budget at all. I feel if you figure out your P&L and if you know your margins, you can just agree with your advertiser that you're willing to spend 2, 3, 4% or whatever that may look like depending on your margin, and agree on a specific tacos. And this way, as you're increasing your sales, your volume, and your brand, your budget increases in proportion. So you always know the margin that you're going to get at the end, but you're always supporting that in proportion. Of course, even with a tacos metric and the tacos type of dynamic budget, you're still going to be limited with that budget. And I think budget day parting and bid day parting, they're two features that came available fairly recent, and they're absolutely fantastic, in particular during those key periods, like you said, during Prime Day, where we know CPCs are super high, and we need to control very, very carefully visibility. If your budget is really small, there's a few things that you can also do. You can prioritize targeting types. For example, is it really smart for us to put a lot of the budget on branded just because the ROAS is high, or could we just dial back and try to focus more on generic and competitor, or even in that case, maybe grouping ASINs in one campaign? Now, that does take a little bit control that we have over which products we're giving visibility, but by putting everything in one campaign, at least you're letting the algorithm give visibility to those ASINs.
Not every company, I guess, is going to want to have an ACOS-based budget. Some businesses work with different priorities, and obviously some won't be a margin-based goal. But for those that do have a tacos budget, it's definitely a much easier way of managing it. Going back onto what you said as well about grouping ASINs into campaigns, something that we've been experimenting recently with a client that had the problem of a large range of SKUs in some European markets was changing the structure from a campaign-based structure to a ad group-based structure. Essentially, what that allowed us to do was, instead of creating hundreds of different campaigns, which could have run the risk of going over budget and not giving us the control over that spend, we split it out into category bases of ad groups, and that meant that instead of having one campaign with a ton of ASINs. We can split it out into to lots of different ad groups and then assign the correct, the most relevant keywords to those ASINs. It's a bit of a complicated ad structure setup, but it definitely helped this client, this situation where you've got a large category of very different products with a low budget.
In terms of match types, what's your view on broads? I've seen campaigns performing incredibly well, but I always feel a bit funny when the budgets are too low to give in so much budget to a match type where essentially we don't have the full control over.
When you're definitely early on in the keyword discovery phase, it is really useful, especially for new product development. But as you get on, as you've discovered more of those high performing keywords, and your auto campaigns, for example, are not starting to bring in as many highly relevant targets, then I think that's the time in which you need to start reducing those.
Also, what you said, Antonio, about like your organic performance, using like that knowledge of how you do organically and kind of funneling that into like a sponsored brand and having a product that really, really does perform, like, you know, really, really high click-through rate with some products possibly that, you know, don't perform as well, merging them together. There's like different ways that you can kind of push the performance of lower performing products using your organic performance that you have already, rather than kind of putting all that spend into products that are going to sell through anyway.
Yeah, I agree with using slow movers, trying to give more visibility to slow movers on already branded keywords. Especially if they're not visible and they don't have the organic ranking, makes total sense. But if you have a limited budget and you're already visible for your own branded term, why spend when you're not visible for the generic and competitive, and that could support you increasing your market share and overall incremental sales? As an example, someone that is looking into buying Lego, for example, likely is going to search for Lego and likely is going to buy Lego rather than another brand.
Yeah, agreed.
There's definitely a use for it. We start off with a few brands that are very highly focused on that branded spend, but are using it in the wrong way. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's some very high intent traffic that you can use to highlight things that they may not have seen anyway.
And then if we move on to diagnosing underperforming campaigns, what type of metrics would you look at and what kind of actions would you take to improve the campaign on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis?
So I think the first thing that I'd look at would be keywords with no sales, over a certain amount of clicks, keywords that are underperforming the account ROAS. You can group for those keywords and quite quickly see how much spend is being wasted there. Obviously, you don't want to get rid of all the keywords that haven't had a chance to perform yet. You've definitely got to be selective with that process. Another big thing is looking at what you're promoting. If a product has a low conversion rate, it doesn't necessarily mean it's because you're targeting the wrong audience. It's also worth picking out those products and looking through the product detail page, seeing if they've got the right to win, seeing if they've got good delivery times, good reviews, and then looking at the competition and seeing how that compares.
I also feel like one of the things that is very missed out on a lot of these campaigns, and in particular generic and competitive keywords, is we take on the approach of eliminating this wasted spend week on week, and then very often we forget about all those keywords that are kind of at the end of the campaign, getting no impressions because the bids are too low, and they're forgotten for weeks. Different keywords will probably perform at different times of the year. So as well, giving them visibility at the right times and always remembering that something that hasn't performed previously doesn't mean that we shouldn't try a few months after, and always making sure that at least we're giving them a chance to shine.
That's why I think it's so important to keep that auto harvesting, even if it's not even if it's an established range, because customer behavior can always change.
I agree, and it always performs well at low bidding. You put a tiny bit of 5p, and it's not going to spend loads, but it will always get you some easy sales there.
The ads console, there's the average time in budget, and looking at that can kind of help you work out, one, how to have like those conversations about which product groups or which campaigns are like always out of budget, and maybe kind of refining the strategy so that the ones that are going out, there may be a reason for that, or you're happy to have that reduced spend on there. But there is that sort of analysis that you can do campaign per campaign, where you're seeing how often, you know, you're out of budget, and kind of making assumptions. And there is those metrics that Amazon provide, like missed clicks, missed sales and stuff, which you can kind of use to have conversations with clients potentially about increasing budgets.
What do you think matters the more for click-through rate, price or an image?
It depends on the category, really. If you're comparing it to a like-for-like competitor, then it's definitely price.
Yeah.
If it's something unique, we've got a few clients that are bringing new products to market that there aren't any direct competitors for. Imagery is incredibly important, and we found that video advertising is a great way to show that as well. Just making that USP just abundantly visible and just showing how the product works, how it's better than the competition is sometimes a really good way to showcase that.
I agree, but also when you're on your phone and you're just scrolling through, video advertising occupies half of your screen.
Yes.
So it's just a great way of, you can't get away from this. This is
Yeah.
big, this is moving, and you have to look at it. Whereas for an image, you're just going through the search results and you can very quickly skip. So if you don't have a good click-through rate on just a normal sponsored products, you kind of need to have that price, of course, but also that thumb-stopping image where people are actually going to stop their finger and say, okay, let me click on this.
I think as
Yeah.
well, customers are quite savvy with like sponsored and like advertised placements and stuff. Like, well, when I shop on Amazon, I know that I kind of look at price as like a big thing. Like reviews is another one that I kind of take a look at. And then I kind of, when I'm in the product detail pages, that's when the kind of content really does push me to kind of actually purchase, I suppose.
I also feel like something that it's completely overlooked. It's seasonal content. I feel not enough brands are doing this. For some categories, it's not as relevant, but for some categories, definitely is. For example, if you're doing costumes, it's super important that you're targeting people for World Book Day, Halloween, and using those creatives and those messaging to adapt to the seasonality. It makes a difference because you're becoming more relevant to the audience. If you're looking for a Halloween costume and you're putting the Halloween products, the 3 feature products with an image, you know that you're already reaching the audience during that time of the year where they're looking for something specifically Halloweeny. Or for example, if you're grocery and you're looking for foods or drinks, putting kind of the festive vibe will also will also make you more relevant and improve your click-through rate.
On Prime Day when I was shopping, I noticed that the brands that had like specific call outs for Prime Day and like the A+ content, I really did like that as like as a customer, because I feel like they know obviously that everyone's gonna be shopping around and they have to kind of work harder, I suppose, to attract that those customers. So having that specific like the deal period content, I think does actually make a massive difference as well.
How far in advance should brands start adjusting their ad strategy for Q4? I mean, on Amazon, and not just toys. I know we speak a lot about toys, but not just toys. Nearly all category overperforms in Q4 simply because of the huge amount of traffic that comes in, and how much preparation should there be?
The data shows that the traffic spike starts in September, so you do see a slight increase then, and that's when a lot of advertisers start those top of funnel sponsored brands campaigns and those category awareness campaigns. I think that's kind of the perfect period for the bringing that category like front of mind, bringing that product front of mind. You will still remember it during the start of Q4, and then you've built up some of that category presence and organic rankings in preparation as well.
A lot of brands are conscious of the flywheel. We just had a client call, essentially we're discussing this exact thing where they want to kind of start that flywheel for the Q4 POs coming in September, knowing that if they start boosting that visibility from September, they'll get bigger orders for Black Friday, Prime Day, to Christmas. So they are conscious of that. So having that in place already to start from September, having already had those like strategy discussions, I think is kind of how a lot of brands run Q4.
I would actually think brands should start before September. You want to get as many impressions and good algorithm juice to those listings as possible, so you can then use it to retarget during Q4. There's so much traffic you can generate, even if you bid everything in your top of search across all keywords. If you're retargeting, you're reaching just an audience that you can't reach with simply sponsored products. What do you think
Yeah.
is probably the most common Q4 advertising mistakes sellers make?
Trying to go after every keyword, every customer, spreading everything so thin that nothing really works. It's just like blasting it out and hoping for the best, I would say.
I think there's also a part there of managing your cost per click, because if you're not careful enough, I've had this brand where in November I saw some of their main generic keywords being £5, which there's no way that's profitable for any brands. So it's just pick your battles, pick the keywords that are worth chasing and the keywords that are strategic for you. You don't have to go for the prime spots sometimes. In particular, during Black Friday, I'm there scrolling through and looking for a deal. Is it absolutely
Pages and
necessary that we
pages.
get the prime spot on top of the page if that keyword is already scrolly? Maybe you can use the rest of search placements and bid more heavily on being in the middle of the page rather than the top and paying half of it, because you know that people are searching for a deal and they're already going to scroll through.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially during the Black Friday period as well, you've got a lot of advertisers going either way, either front loading their spend or waiting till the day itself after the deals have already been on for a week already. Yeah, it really hurts your profitability in that sense when you're just bidding for the price of placements essentially. When we were targeting Black Friday last year, there was a huge increase in CPCs on Black Friday itself, but the most profitable day for the majority of the clients that we managed was that first day of deals. The traffic increase and the amount of preparation that Amazon had been doing for the event drove an incredible amount of high quality traffic, and advertisers weren't ready for it.
I also feel like people underuse a lot their AVSs, in particular for 1P, of course. Feel if you already used 60% of your deals unit, why are you still pushing your products if they're going to sell anyway? And a lot of the times, this information is not even passed on by the AVS, kind of chasing that AVS to give that information. There's no point on spending when you're going to sell anyway. And it's
Yeah.
better to reallocate and tweak the campaigns a bit to give the visibility to the products that need a little bit more help. In terms of cross-selling strategies, do you think they make a good impact in seasonal campaigns, and how can you use it to a brand's favor?
Had some success with products that are perfectly complementary. I mean, products that are designed for each other in cross-selling. We have some dedicated campaigns which are just cross-selling a certain attachment or certain complementary products, and we get an incredibly high return on investment from that type of targeting. You just have to make sure if it's a brand with a very varied product range that you're not targeting a completely different category that wouldn't appeal to the same customer.